الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أما بعد. To continue the study of Al-Ibanah Al-Sughra of Ibn Battah, before we start, I want to read an answer of Shaykh Sulaiman al-Ruhaili, where he was asked, did the four Imams differ in affairs of Aqidah, like Allah rising above the throne or descending to the lowest heavens? And he replied, Hafidhahullah, as for attributes, I do not know of any differing in it between the four Imams. Rather, all of them were upon what the Salaf agreed upon. All of them said, whoever says the Quran is created is a kafir. And all of them said what Imam Malik said, Allah is above the heavens and His knowledge is everywhere. Allah is above His throne and with us with His knowledge. And He's with us with His knowledge. All of them, the four Imams, they said in regards to the chapter of attributes, that which the rightly guided predecessors agreed upon. He says with sadness, and this is point shahid, because a few questions keep coming regarding this subject. With sadness, some of the followers of the madhahib, who oppose the belief system of the Imams, distorted the speech of the Imams so that it becomes in accordance to what they themselves, the latter ones, are upon. Instead of them returning to the speech of the Imams in Aqidah, they started returning the speech of the Imams to their own Aqidah. They distorted the speech of the Imams so as in accordance to their own beliefs, and that is from the plots of shaitan against them. If they were truthful with Allah, they would know that that which is obligatory upon them is to return to the Quran and the Sunnah, and what the Salaf of this Ummah agreed upon and what the great Imams indicated towards. So this shows that the four Imams, in a general sense, their Aqidah was one. Their Aqidah was that of the Salaf. And the latter of those who claim to be, for example, Ash'ari or Maturidi or these kind of groups, that they weren't in reality upon the way of these four Imams. Rather, they were upon a way that was innovated, and later what they did was, they tried to take the speech of the Imams and return it to their speech. And this is which is wrong. For you find that the scholars in the past, even those who they claim to follow, like Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari and other than them, they returned back in many affairs to the way of the Salaf. Now, Ibn Battah, he says, وَقَالَ مَيْمُونٍ مِهْرَانٍ إِيَّاكُمْ وَكُلَّ إِسْمٍ يُسَمَّى بِغَيْرِ الْإِسْلَامِ. Beware of every name which one uses and is named by other than Islam. Now, Maymun al-Mihran, he was an Imam who relayed from many companions, or relayed from the companions and many Imams. Now, from some of his statements, he says, لا تجالس أهل القدر. Do not sit with the people of Qadr. ولا تسب أصحاب محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. And do not curse the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. ولا تعلموا النجوم. And do not learn النجوم, the stars, about stars. Also from that which is mentioned regarding him, that one day he had a dispute with a man regarding al-irja. What is al-irja? You know what irja is? What's irja? Irja. What's irja? What does someone when they say they believe irja? What does it mean? تأخير الأمل عن الإيمان. Delaying, not considering actions to be from Iman. So this man, he's sitting with Maymun al-Mihran and he's disputing with him regarding irja. Whilst they're doing so, they heard a woman start singing songs. She started singing songs. So Maymun, he said to him, أين إيمان هذه من إيمان مريم بنت إمران. From that which these people of irja believe, that the iman of a fasik is like the iman of a righteous person. The iman of an evildoer smokes and drinks alcohol is like the iman of Jibril alayhi salam. So Maymun says to him, the iman of this woman, where is it from the iman of Maryam bint Imran? So the man, he left and couldn't give him an answer. Also, they say about Maymun, that someone said to him, Ya Aba Ayyub, ما يزال الناس بخير ما أبقاك الله لهم. The people remain to be upon good as long as you remain. فقال أقبل على شأنك. He said, do what is regarding your own affair. ما يزال الناس بخير ما اتقوا ربهم. They will continue to be upon good as long as they fear their Lord. And from that which, the beautiful statements that have come from him, rahimullah, and is authentic to him, that he said, or afwan, na'am, that is authentic to him, he said, ثلاث لا تبلون نفسك بهن. Three things, do not try yourself with them. Three things, and how much important this is in our time for people to pay concern to this. 3 things, do not try yourself with them. لا تدخل على السلطان. Do not enter upon the ruler. وإن قلت آمره بطاعة الله. Even if you're going to say, I'm going to command him with the obedience of Allah. ولا تصغين بسمعك إلى هوى. And do not lend your ear to desires. فإنك لا تدري ما يعلق بقلبك من. You do not know what your heart's going to get attached to it from it. And the last one, ولا تدخل على امرأة. Do not enter upon a woman. ولو قلت أعلمها كتاب الله. Even if you say, I'm going to teach her the book of Allah. Do not enter upon a woman. Even if you say, I'm going to teach her the book of Allah. How many people in our time are in need of this last one? And this is authentic to Maimun Mihran. From his beautiful statements as well, he said, فَلْيَأْتِ, or he says, إِذَا أَتَى الرَّجُلْ بَابَ سُلْطَانٍ. If someone comes to the door of the ruler, فَاحْتُجِبَ عَنْهُ, and is veiled from him, he can't enter the door from the ruler, then let him go to Buyutul Rahman, the houses of Allah, for they are mufattaha, they are open. فَلْيُسَلِّ رَكْعَتَيْنِ وَلْيَسْأَلْ حَاجَتَهُ. Let him pray 2 rak'ahs and ask Allah for his need. Showing us a person shouldn't be near the people, rather should be one who connects himself to Allah and ask him of his needs. Then Ibn Battah, he says, وقال مالك بن أنس لم يكن من هذه الأهواء على أهد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا أبي بكر ولا عمر ولا عثمان. That these desires and innovations were not present during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, nor Abu Bakr, nor Umar, nor Uthman. As Imam Malik, he's well known, he's one of the Imams of the 4 madhabs. Shaykh al-Islam. Imam al-Dhahabi says, Hujjatul Ummah, an evidence for the Ummah. Imam Dar al-Hijrah, Imam of Medina, Abu Abdullah Malik ibn Anas. Now Imam Malik, from that which they mentioned regarding him, is that he sought knowledge at a young age. He sought knowledge at a young age. And he sat to teach the people and benefit them at a young age. At the young age of 21 years old, he was teaching people and giving fatwas. And that when he was a young man, he sought knowledge, and the people, they started to come to him and study under him, until during the Khilafah of Al-Rashid, his circles became very big, until he passed away, rahimahullah. From that which they mentioned about him, that the scholars of Medina, the Imams of Medina after the Prophet ﷺ, were Zayd ibn Thabit and Aisha. Then Ibn Umar, then Sa'id al-Musayyib, then Az-Zuhri, then Ubaidullah ibn Umar, then Malik. Showing the great status of this Imam, rahimahullah. From his great students was Shafi'i. And he was a obedient student of Imam Malik. He said, إِذَا ذُكِّ الْعُلَمَاء فَمَالِكٌ النَّجْمُ. If the scholars are mentioned, Malik is a star. And further show that is a famous story that occurred between Al-Shafi'i and Muhammad bin Hassan. Now Al-Shafi'i is from the great students of Imam Malik. Muhammad bin Hassan, who is he a student of? Abu Hanifa. And then later on he studied with who? Al-Shafi'i. And for that reason he has a version of Al-Muwatta. So he says, Muhammad bin Hassan said, is your companion Al-Shafi'i more knowledgeable than my companion Abu Hanifa? So Al-Shafi'i, he said to them, I ask you by Allah, who knows the Sunnah more? Al-Shafi'i or Abu Hanifa? So he said, Malik knows it. Malik or Abu Hanifa? He said Malik. Muhammad Hassan said Malik. He said, I ask you, who is more knowledgeable regarding analogy? He said Abu Hanifa. He said, Malik is more knowledgeable regarding the book of Allah, and abrogation, now it's abrogated, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, than Abu Hanifa. And the one who's more knowledgeable regarding the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, then he's more deserving of speaking. And this is authentic to them. Showing us here that these Imams, they weren't blind followers. This is the point of the Shahid of the story, they weren't blind followers. Now this narration of Imam Malik, what is showing us here that innovations weren't really present during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, or Abu Bakr, or Umar, or Uthman. But they occurred during the time of Ali radiallahu anhu. Where during the time of Ali, the Khawarij, they started having strength and they became widespread. And also, As-Saba'iyya. As-Saba'iyya, the followers of Abdullah ibn Saba. They also became widespread at that time. Now this latter group is the group that claimed or said to Ali ibn Abi Talib that you are Allah. A'udhu billah. They claimed that he was Allah. So what he did was, he made holes in the ground and he lightened them with fires. He made holes in the ground and he let them in fires. And if someone didn't return back from their belief, he would throw them in the fire and let them burn. He said, لَمَّا رَأَيْتُ الْأَمْرَ أَمْرًا مُنْكَرًا. When I seen that the affair became very evil, أَحْجَجْتُ نَارِي وَدَعُوتُ كُنْبَرًا. I lit my fire and I called my free slave Kunbara to do this. The point of Shahid is that during Ali ibn Abi Talib's time was when these innovations, they became widespread. Now some may ask, but in the time of the Prophet there was Khawarij. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Khawarij said to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, i'dil. In time of Bakr radiallahu anh, yes, there were some innovations. In time of Umar and Uthman, the scholars, they mentioned, Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyya, that the reason why the scholars, they ascribe these innovations to the time of Ali is because they weren't widespread during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman, and they didn't have any strength. They didn't have any strength. But once the time of Ali came, they started to have strength. And the Khawarij rebelled against him, and the Rafidah, they said these kind of statements. The Saba'iyya. So they say that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it didn't have strength like that. The Prophet was in control. Also in the time of Bakr radiallahu anh, they don't mention the affair of when the people, they left the religion by saying they're not going to give zakat. Why? Because they say this is closer to disbelief than innovation. It's innovation of disbelief, but it's closer to being kufr because they rejected the obligation of zakat. And in the time of Umar, it is well known that he was very firm, as mentioned in the story of As-Sabir that we went through. As for Uthman, they say the innovation wasn't widespread like that. It was very hidden. For that reason, you'll find that they got him, they killed him radiallahu anh. How? They planned it hiddenly until they got him and they sieged him and then they killed him in his own house, radiallahu anh. But in the time of Ali, it became widespread, it was wide open. And for that reason, the scholars, they mentioned that these innovations, they became widespread and predominant in the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and that before that, they weren't as strong and they were hidden, although there may have been some kind of innovations present. Then he says, وقال مالك بن مغول إذا تسمى الرجل بغير الإسلام والسنة فالهكه بأي دين شئت. If a person ascribes himself to other than Islam and the Sunnah, then adjoin him to whatever he has chosen. Adjoin him to whatever he has chosen. What he's saying is, if a person leaves Islam or leaves the Sunnah and he's chosen a way other than Islam and the Sunnah, then adjoin him to that way. Or adjoin to the way that he has chosen. If he says, for example, he's a kafir, or he's a Yahudi, or he's a Nasrani, or he's a Majusi, a fire worshipper, then ascribe him to that. For whether he ascribes to this or that, al-kufr millatun wahida. Disbelief in reality is one nation. Disbelief, all of it is one nation. Whether you believe this or that is disbelief. It's against Islam and it's falsehood. Now, as a benefit, before someone misunderstands this and doesn't understand the rules that pertain to making takfir al-mu'ayyan, making takfir of someone specifically. Before we get to that, Shaykh al-Uthaymin mentions, if a person says something that will make him leave Islam, like if he says, for example, he's a Jew or a Christian or a fire worshipper, or that he's free from Islam or free from the Quran or the Prophet, then he's a disbeliever and an apostate, and he'll be held accountable for this statement of his. Imam Ibn Baz, he said, as for if one says he's a Jew or a Christian, intending by that disbelief, pay attention to that statement, intending by that disbelief, that he is believing in this, and that he is leaving from Islam to Judaism, and he has chosen it, then he is a disbeliever. If he says he is a Jew, meaning he says, I'm leaving my religion, I've chosen Judaism or Christianity, or fire worshiping or communism, for example, or similar to that, and he is desiring these religions, he's doing it with free will and desire, then he is a disbeliever in Allah. What does that lead us to? That something being a general rule that this is kufr and disbelief. We all agree to that, this is kufr and disbelief. But to apply that ruling specifically to someone, then a person must meet the conditions and take away the preventatives. As Brother Faisal went to Nawaqid al-Islam. And as a refreshment, we'll mention some of them. Because some may say, how could that be possible? Well, let's say someone is extremely angry until his intellect has been gone. And he makes a statement. You can't hold him accountable to that. There's a preventative here. Or someone has a gun to his head and says to him, say you're a Jew. And he says, I'm a Jew, although believing in his heart that he's a Muslim. How can you say to him he's become a kafir by way of that? So there's rules to specifying someone with this ruling. So when you read statements, it doesn't mean right away that everyone you hear say this statement that right away he's a kafir. So from that, which the scholars have mentioned, when it comes to declaring a specific person a kafir, a disbeliever after he's accepted Islam and he's been a Muslim, number one, you must have evidence that this statement or this action or this belief is kufr. It's not based upon what me and you think. I think it's kufr. No. At-takfir is tawqifi. It's dependent of an evidence. This must be an evidence that this statement, this action, or this belief is disbelief. Number one. Number two, applying this rule to a specific person, you must meet the conditions and take away the preventative affairs. From the conditions is knowledge. A person must have knowledge that this is disbelief. He must not be ignorant. He must have knowledge that this is disbelief. Allah says, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. We will never punish anyone until we send to them a messenger, someone to clarify to them. So knowledge is a condition and a preventative is ignorance. Number two, that he must not have an interpretation which has some sort of angle to it. Ta'wil as-sa'igh, meaning he must not have an interpretation which has some kind of interpretation to it of correct angle. Even though he's wrong, but this is a preventative. Now, if he's interpreting in a way where there's no angle of correctness to it, then that's not allowed. Now, there's evidences for that, but from the evidence that Sharia is mentioned is Al-Ijma', is consensus. So Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyya says, وَبِهَذَا يُعْلَمْ أَنَّ التَّأْوِيلَ مَانِعٌ مِنَ التَّكْفِيرِ بِإِجْمَاعِ الصَّحَابَةِ. With this it is known that interpretation is a preventative for takfir by consensus of the Sahaba. By consensus of the Sahaba. Another point that they mention, the third one, is that a person who falls into kufr, whether statements, action, or belief, he must intend it. He must intend the disbelieving statement or action. For this, a condition for takfir. As for not having an intent for an action or a statement, like example, a person has a slip of the tongue, or a person is extreme happiness where he's lost his mind, or a person in extreme sadness or anger where he's lost his mind, he's not held accountable for that. The proof of that is a hadith of Anas ibn Malik, that the Prophet ﷺ said about a man. He said, Allahumma anta rabbi, Allahumma anta abdi, wa ana rabbuk. This man, from his severe happiness of after finding his lost animal in his mount, he said, Oh Allah, a'udhu billah, oh Allah, you are my servant and I'm your Lord. Akhta'a min shiddatil farh. He made a mistake out of severe excitement and happiness. Out of severe excitement and happiness. So showing there's a manner, there's a preventative. So someone, for example, saying this statement, that example, he's a Jew. You got in an argument with him, he got very angry, and he lost his senses, and he doesn't know what he's saying no more, and he says to you this statement, you can't say to me you're a kafir because of this statement. So showing us here that there's rules to this. Someone just doesn't start saying to this one you're a kafir and that one you're a kafir. Yes, we're saying a ruling of an action or a statement or a belief is kufr, but to apply that specific rule to someone, there's rules and regulations to it. Another one the scholars mention is having free choice and free will, and not being forced and coerced. For if someone is forced to do an act, or to say a statement, or to hold a belief, or to say a statement, or or do an action, as long as his heart still has iman in it, and he's just doing it to stay away from being killed, then he doesn't disbelieve by way of that. Allah says, "Man kafara billah min ba'di iman illa man ukrih wa qalbuhu mutma'innun bil iman." Except for no one is coerced, but his heart is still filled with iman. Next he says, وَقَالَ أَطَاعَ إِنَّ فِي مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى عَلَى مُوسَى لَا تُجَالِسْ أَهْلِ الْأَهْوَاءِ فَيُحْدِثُ فِي قَلْبِكَ مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ. Do not sit with the people of innovation, for they'll put in your heart that which wasn't there before. And this, as you see clearly, is from Israeliyat. Now, here what he's saying is that if you're on the sunnah and on the truth, and you sat with the innovator, you're not safe from him placing something in your heart that which wasn't there before. As come the narration of Abbas, do not sit with the people of innovation, for it sickens the heart. You may sit with them, you may say some things of truth and falsehood, and the falsehood remains in your heart. It wasn't there before, but after sitting with him, it got stuck in your heart. Now, as the scholars have mentioned, when it comes to Israeliyat, in reality, we can suffice ourselves from them with authentic narrations and statements of the Sahaba and the Tabi'in, then that is sufficiency. But yes, at times it's allowed to relay it by way of an admonition, for admonitions. So the scholars have mentioned when it comes to Israeliyat, it comes the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Relay from me even if it's one verse. وَحَدِّثُوا عَنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ وَلَا حَرَجٍ. And relay from Banu Israel, and there's no problem in that. وَمَنْ كَذَبَ عَلِيهِ مُتَأَمِّدًا فَلْيَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَهُ مِنَ النَّارِ. And whoever lies upon me on purpose, let him take a seat in the hellfire. Imam Abbas, when discussing this hadith, he says when it comes to Israeliyat, they fall into one of three categories or three types. Number one, that which is in agreement to the truth from the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. This we accept and we can relay it. The second one is that which opposes that which has come in the Quran and the sunnah. Then this we reject and is falsehood. And the third one, that which is neither from the first one or the second one. We don't know, it doesn't oppose the truth and it's not falsehood. But we don't know if it's true or if wrong. فَلَا تُصَدِّقُوهُمْ وَلَا تُكَذِّبُوهُمْ. They're not deemed them to be truthful and they're not deemed them to be liars. This third one, where it doesn't oppose the truth and it's not clear falsehood, then the scholars say it's allowed to relate based on the hadith we mentioned. وَحَدِّثُ عَنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل وَلَا حَرَجْ. Relate from Banu Israel and no problem. They say this third one is what the hadith is talking about. That which we are unaware if it's in accordance to in agreement to the truth and it doesn't oppose the truth. For that reason, Imam Al-Ibanah says, this one you can relay because there may be some kind of admonition in it. There may be some form of admonition in it. This is where the scholars relay these kind of narrations. Then he says, وَقَالَ أَبُو قِلَابَةَ مَبْتَدَعَ قَوْمٌ بِدْعَةً إِلَّا اسْتَحَلُّوا فِيهَا السَّيْفِ. Abu Qilaba, he said, that no one has innovated innovation except that because of it, they have made the sword halal to be used against the Muslims. They made the sword halal to be used against the Muslims. This narration is authentic. This narration is authentic to him. And Abu Qilaba is the Imam. He's also been described as Shaykh al-Islam. And he is the one where is well known that famous story of the man who had lost his hands and his feet, and he was by the shore and he was praising Allah even though he's in that state. And then he lost his son. That narration in reality, some of the scholars, they do authenticate it. And some of the scholars, they've weakened it. But what's correct regarding that narration is that if you're to look at it, in reality there is some strength to that narration, as comes in the book of Ibn Hibban, Al-Thiqat and Adnan. So it does have some strength to it, that narration of him losing his hands and his feet. For Al-Dhahabi also mentions Siyar A'lam Nubala from in his biography that he was trialed with this. That he was trialed with a sickness, because of it he lost his limbs. So showing us that there is some strength to it, and the scholars have mentioned this regarding him. As for this narration of his, then Shaykh Al-Raji says, in this it clarifies that innovations lead to fighting between the Muslims. The innovator permits fighting against Ahlul Sunnah due to the envy and hatred that they have against Ahlul Sunnah, due to their belief that they are upon the truth and Ahlul Sunnah are upon falsehood. For this reason, they permit fighting them and using the sword against them. Then he says, for that reason, you'll find some of the people of innovation permitting the blood of the Muslims. You find some of the Jahmiyyah, for example, permitting the blood of Ahlul Sunnah, deeming it to be allowed for their blood to be spilled, the same way the Rafidah did, and the Khawarij, the Mu'tazila, other than them. And this shows the truthfulness of the statement of Abu Qilaba. Shaykh al-Islam, in Taymiyyah, he says, Aslu kulla fitna, that the origin of every trial and tribulation, hum Shia. They are the Shia. وَمَنْ انضوى إِلَيْهِمْ, and those who have joined them. وَكَثِيرٌ مِنَ السُّيُوفِ الَّتِي, many of the swords that have come against the people of Islam, إِنَّمَا كَانَ مِنْ جِهَتِهِمْ, was because of them. And if you look at our time today, look at Syria, look at Yemen, and look at other lands, who killed the Muslims in those lands? The Rafidah. The Rafidah, those who killed the Muslims. So showing us the statement of Abu Qilab in reality is still truthful to our time. Many of the Muslims that died, for example in Syria, 1 million Muslims died. Who killed 1 million Muslims in Syria? Rafidah. The Rafidah did it. In Yemen, who's killing Ahlul Sunnah? The Rafidah killing Ahlul Sunnah. Showing us here that the statement of Abu Qilab in reality is a statement that is still truthful to our time. For that reason, some of the Salaf like Ayyub as-Sikhtiyani and other than them, they would label all of the people of desires as Khawarij. They would label all the people of desires as Khawarij. They said, إِنَّ الْخَوَارِجِ اخْتَلَفُوا فِي الْإِسْمِ وَاجْتَمَعُوا عَلَى السَّيْفِ. They may have differed in name and titles, but they all agreed against Ahlul Sunnah, using the sword against Ahlul Sunnah. They may have different in names. This one's a Rafid, this one's a Mu'tazili, this one's a Murji, this one's this and that. But all in اجتمعوا على السيف. They all agreed upon the sword being used against Ahlul Sunnah. And this is still true, as we mentioned, to our time today. Then he says, وقال أبو قلابة في قوله تعالى إن الذين اتخذوا العجل سينال غضب من ربهم وذلة في الحياة الدنيا وكذلك نجزي المفترين. Those who worshipped the calf with certainty will be afflicted with the wrath from their Lord, as well as disgrace in this life of this world. This is how we reward those who invent falsehood. Abu Qilaba said after in this ayah, فَيَجَزَاءَ كُلَّ مُفْتَرٍ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. It is the reward and recompense of every innovator or inventor until the day of judgment. Abu Qilaba here is mentioning in this verse that this verse also includes innovators. وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُفْتَرِينَ also includes innovators. Ibn Kathir, in his tafsir when discussing this ayah, he said that this verse also includes everyone who innovates in innovation. فَإِنَّ ذُلُّ الْبِدْعَةِ وَمُخَالَفَةِ الرِّسَالَةِ مُتَّصِلَ مِنْ قَلْبِ عَلَى كَتِفَيْهِ. He says, for indeed, this also includes them. Then he says, وَقَالَ حَسَنَ بَسِ إِنَّ ذُلُّ الْبِدْعَةِ عَلَى أَكْتَافِهِمْ. The disgrace and humiliation of innovations on their shoulders. And he also mentions, Ibn Kathir, وَهَكَذَا روي عن أيوب السختياني وأبي قلابة. It was also from Ayyub al-Sikhtiyani and Abi Qilaba that when they read this verse, they said it is regarding every innovator as well. وقال سفيان بن عيينة كل صاحب بدعة ذليل. Every innovator is lowly and disgraced. Every innovator is lowly and disgraced. Now, Imam al-Sa'di in his tafsir, he also says, anyone who invents something against Allah and is a liar against His legislation, saying against it that which it didn't say and come with, then he has a share from the anger of Allah and disgrace in this worldly life. And this includes whom? The innovator. Some may say, but some innovators in our time today, they have honor and they have respect and they have many students. Ash-Shatibi discussing Al-I'tisam. He says, كُلُّ مَنْ ابْتَدَعَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ. Whoever innovates in the religion of Allah, فَهُوَ ظَلِيلٌ حَقِيرٌ بِسَبِّ بِدْعَتِهِ. He is lowly and disgraced because of his innovation. وَإِنْ ظَهَرَ لِبَادِ الرَّأْيِ إِزُّهُ وَجُبَرُوتُهُ. Even if it seems to those who are hasty in their thinking and quick in their thinking that these people have honor and strength. Then he says, فَهُمْ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ أَذِلَّةٌ. They in reality in themselves are lowly and disgraced. So Ahlul Sunnah, there are those who have honor and strength, even if they are alone. أَنْتَ الْجَمَاعَ وَإِن كُنْتَ وَحْدَكَ. You are the jama'ah, the congregation, even if you are alone. As Imam, the Sahabi, Abdullah Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he said, as for Ahlul Bid'ah, even if they have many people with them and many followers, they're still lowly and disgraced. Allah Jalla wa Ala, وَقَلِيلٌ مِنْ عِبَادِي الشَّكُورُ. How many little of my slaves are thankful and grateful? وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرٌ بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا وَهُمْ يُشْرِكُونَ. How many people, not a lot of people, وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرٌ بِاللَّهِ, many of them don't believe in Allah except that they set up in partners with Allah Jalla wa Ala. And Allah Jalla wa Ala, He says in another ayah, وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. Majority of people will not be believers even if you try your best. So Ahlul Sunnah, they're the ones who have honor because of them found the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Whereas Ahlul Bid'ah, even if they have a lot of followers and they have a lot of money and they have a lot of positions, in reality they are lowly and they are humiliated and disgraced in this dunya before the hereafter. So these are all narrations from the great Salaf which show the importance of following the Sunnah and staying away from innovation. If any quick question, we'll take now. If not, we'll continue next week. Yes.